Hi all, let's talk about how to prepare for Azure Security Exam SC900. In this, we will cover about the exam, resources for preparation, preparation plan and timeline, and at the end we'll cover in detail Exam Cram and things which you need to remember to clear this exam. So about the exam, this exam is for candidate with both technical or non-technical background. It could be business stakeholder, new or existing IT professional or student. This is a basic security exam. The benefit of this exam is to get familiarized with fundamentals of security, compliance and identity, which is SCI, across cloud-based and related Microsoft services. Prerequisite is none, but having a basic knowledge of Microsoft Azure or Micro 365 helps. But even without that, you can easily clear this exam. And in the exam, there are like 40 to 60 questions to be covered in 60 minutes. Questions are generally not lengthy, it's to the point specific questions. The question type is multiple choice, drop downs to complete sentences, match combination or some true false questions. There are no labs in this exam. The cost at this moment is like 99 USD. Sometime for this kind of exams like fundamental exam, Microsoft provides some kind of vouchers which makes it free if you attend some training, but I haven't seen it so far. If something comes up, I'll put a link in the description of this video. Resources for preparation for this exam. The best resource for the preparation is Microsoft official learning web, which is like this. If you go to Microsoft learning website, search for SC900. So here itself you will see it talk about the skills, and there you will see the courses. So for each module they have made different learning path. You can just click start and go through the material. So they have subsections and some kind of knowledge checks. So that is I found it as a pretty good source. It has some videos to go through and it has a lot of other details covered, which pretty much cover all what comes in the exam. But it could be a little bit cumbersome to go through it, but it's worth going through it as it's a pretty good source for learning. Then again, going through that is one thing, and then you need to see what you need to learn or something. There are few things which you need to cram, which I have covered in Exam Cram, which is coming up next. And I have organized this information also in a better consumable way, and I will mention what to learn and what to cram specifically. About the practice tests and all, it is not mandatory again, but yeah, Udemy and WizLab and couple of other websites provide couple of practice tests. You can try one or two just to get confidence. And practical labs are optional. It's completely up to you. It's not mandatory at all. There is no labs in the exam, but if just to want to play around, you can try a couple of things. Plan with timeline. So this is the 12 to 15 hours plan, which starts with the main preparation and high level understanding, which is, as I mentioned, going through material from Microsoft Learn website itself. You can keep aside 7 to 8 hours for that. And then practice tests, which are optional, but if you give 2 tests, it will take 1 to 2 hours. And then you revise the content for things to remember and cram few items for the exam, which will be 1 to 2 hours. Lab practices on the portal. Again, this is optional, but if you want to check out some of the security features in Azure, you can set aside 1 hour for that. And the exam itself, exam registration, check-in, etc., keep 2 hours for that. So give or take, it will be like 12 to 15 hours, where 2 to 3 hours are optional. Now let's come to the main part. How do we prepare for this exam? What to cram and what to learn? Let's go through that in detail. So the content for this exam is divided into these 4 units. It starts with the concept of security and compliance, which covers 5 to 10%, followed by other 3 units. So if I expand the first pillar, it covers 2 parts. Describes security and compliance concepts and methodologies, very basic, and then define the concept of identity. Let's go through that in detail. So as you can see at the top, now we are into the first pillar, which is concept of security, compliance, identity, which has subtopics which are shown on the left hand side. So this is structured intentionally in this way so that you don't lose which topic we are or which subtopic we are, so that we can focus in the main content in the center while maintaining the understanding that it falls under which subtopic and which main topic. So let's get started. So the first important thing for the exam is zero trust methodology. So what Microsoft says, they believe in zero trust model, which is trust no one and verify everything. You see here this symbol, this means that these things we need to cram for the exam or remember for the exam. So this zero trust guiding principle, there are 3 guiding principles: verify explicitly, least privilege access, and assume breach. So you need to remember these 3 principles. 6 foundation pillars it has. You need to remember all these 6. There could be question, hey, is this one of those 6 pillar? It's like identity, devices, applications, data, infrastructure, network. Moving on. The second topic is about shared responsibility model. This is also a very important topic for the exam. Here it taps out who handles security tasks, whether it is cloud provided or the customer. So this diagram is very important. It talks about at different level who has the responsibility, whether it is Microsoft or for the customer. For example, if you see at the bottom of the diagram, for physical data center, most of the responsibility will be on Microsoft. As you go up to the top where it is information and data, there the security responsibility is by the customer. So this is very important. Again, you can guess from that image that you need to remember this, and there will be questions around this. And then Microsoft has a concept of defense in depth. What that means, that it uses a layered approach to security rather than relying on a single parameter to slow down the attack. So you need to understand what are all those layers. Like the data sits at the bottom, and on the top it's a physical security, then identity, then perimeter, network, compute, application. So you should have a basic understanding of that. Moving on, there is again the concept of, it's a concept under defense in depth. It's called confidentiality, integrity, and availability, or CIA. So all of this, there is a balance to be maintained. It's called security trade-off, right? That means as the availability increases, confidentiality or integrity might decrease. So we need to figure out a balance for the organization. So this diagram also you can keep in mind that this is the security trade-off. Moving on, common threats. So there are like basic definition. We know most of this, but good for the exam, we should know what is the difference between each. Like data breach, as we know, it's a threat that can result in breach of personal data. Whereas dictionary attack, or also known as brute force attack, when a hacker attempts to steal an identity by automatically trying a very large number of known passwords. That is called dictionary attack. Same way, what is ransomware attack, where some of the files or folders could be encrypted by kind of a by a hacker, and they can extort money from the victims. And malware is term described for a malicious application or code that can cause damage and disrupt normal use of devices, or it can help give the hacker or the attacker unauthorized access to your system. Disruptive attack. So disruptive attack is important. It is when someone try to exhaust an application resource and making it unavailable for legitimate user. For example, you have a chatbot or you have an API, and someone is sending a millions of requests to that API, and it is exhausting it and making it unavailable for the user. That is called disruptive attack. So these common threats are important to know. Most of these are known things, but sometimes a differentiation could be a close definition. Other common threats are like rootkits, Trojan, worm, exploits. I'm not gonna go through all of these, but these are also something you should remember from the exam and the difference between them. Next one is encryption. So encryption is important, not in depth, but a high level concept, that it is a process to make data unreadable and unusable to unauthorized viewers. So as you can see, we encrypt the data using a key, and the similar kind of key could be used to decrypt that data. So in symmetric and asymmetric encryption, the difference should be known, and that these are the so in symmetric there is a shared key for both encryption and decryption, but in asymmetric there is a public key for encryption, but there is a private key for the description. So that we need to know the difference. And encryption can be done at data at rest, or it could be done at data at transit. So these are the two ways how the encryption is done at high level. So this we need to know. And similar to encryption, there is another technique which is called hashing. In hashing, it does not use key, but there is a hashing algorithm that converts the original text to a hashed value. But it cannot be decrypted back. But the other texts, for example, password, can again be using the same hash algorithm converted into a hashed value and can be compared if it is right or wrong. It could be predictive, like a brute force dictionary attack can be added. So there is a method called salt, where passwords are often salted in the sense a fixed random length value is added to the password so that it can provide a unique hash function. Unique hashes for every input can be created. So that is called salting. That way hackers cannot know the salt value. The hash password are more secure in that way. So this basic definition of hashing and salting is important to know, and the difference between hashing and the encryption. Then the next topic in this is about cloud adoption framework. This is a standard framework Microsoft is using for Azure, which consists of documentation, implementation, guidance, best practice, and tools to help business to implement strategic necessaries to succeed in the cloud. So it kind of guiding principles, documentation, best practices, etc. So there could be questions if you need to see the implementation guidance about Microsoft Cloud, where should you go? So you should be looking into cloud adoption framework, and there is a life cycle. It defines all these best practices, etc. throughout the life cycle as shown. So this is also good to remember for the exam. So with this, we are done with the first topic under our first pillar, which is describe security and compliance concepts and methodologies. The second one under this is define identity concepts. Let's get into that. So here again, as I mentioned, the structure of this, on the left hand side are the topics, subtopics, which will be covered under identity concept. So this is the first one is very important, identity as a primary security parameter. So it's a new security parameters identity is considered that enables organization to secure their assets. So as you know, what is identity? Identity is how someone or something can be verified or authenticated to be who they say they are. It could be associated with the user, an application, a device, or something else. So that is the basic definition of identity we should know. And again, identity sits on 4 pillars. This we need to remember for the exam, like administration, that how do we admin the identities, then authentication, how do we tell whether you are the right person who we think you are, authorization, determine the level of access an authorized and authenticated person or service should have, and auditing, it's about tracking who does what, when, where, and how. So these are the 4 pillars of identity, and you should remember that. And everything starts with A. So that is a trick to remember all this. Now authentication, as we mentioned earlier, it's a process of verifying an identity to be legitimate. So Azure provide AAD, Azure Active Directory Authority methods. There are 2 ways. One is normal password, which we all know have issues. The password can be leaked, or someone can try to brute force with the dictionary method. So then what Microsoft is promoting a lot is called MFA, which is nothing but multi-factor authentication. So along with the password, it tries to do different multi-factor, like something you know, which could be a password, something you have, like for example a phone, or something you are, which could be a biometric or retina reading. So with this combination, they try to secure the password. or secure the identity. And there is another thing, definition security default. What is security default? It's a set of basic identity security mechanism recommended by Microsoft. For example, a company who is new to this cloud and they don't have a lot of expertise, what they should do. So Microsoft provide a basic identity security mechanism for them. And I have listed 3 of those. For example, enforce Azure Active Directory MFA for all the users, forcing administration to use multi-factor authentication. These are all examples of security defaults which Microsoft provides. Identity providers. So what is an identity provider? Identity provider is someone which create, maintain, manage identity information while offering authentication, authorization, or auditing services. So I'll give you an example. For example, if we try to log in somewhere, we see they let us allow to log in through Twitter, Google, etc. So they are acting as an identity provider. Thing to remember here is that there is a trust relationship. This kind of question comes. The server validates the security token through its trust relationship with the identity provider. So a server who is providing the service plus the identity provider, they both share a trust relationship, an agreement, so that they can be used to identify the user for some other server. So that we should know this kind of questions can come. Now there is a concept of Active Directory. So as you know, directory is something, is a structure that stores information about objects on the network. And directory service stores data and makes it available to network users, admins, services, and application. So this is how Active Directory came into picture. Active Directory is a set of directory services deployed on Microsoft as part of Windows 2000 for on-premises domain-based network. So what kind of Active Directory domain services, the benefit it provides is it provides a user to have access to these services which are maintained in the Active Directory. Like for example, it can store information about the member of the domain, like devices, user, who has access to what credential, etc. So that is provided by Active Directory. It does not, however, provide support to mobile devices, SS application, etc. So that's where Azure Active Directory helps. It can provide organization with an identity as a service solution for the application across cloud and on-premises. So Microsoft is promoting Azure Active Directory AAD a lot. So you can see some question that what is identity as a service provided through. So through Azure Active Directory. Very simple questions around this you can expect. So then there is the concept of federated services. So federated service enable access of service across organization or domain boundaries by establishing trust relationship. Again, like there are like 2 domains, domain A, domain B. Here you can see there is a this domain has B as a identity provider. Here I have identity provider as A. They have a trust relationship. So if a user is authenticated with B and they share the access, that user can go and log in into A without again and again providing the user ID and password. One thing to remember here is with federation, trust is not always bidirectional. So if this user logs in here and this is allowing the user to log into this website, that does not mean the opposite always true. It depends what kind of trust is there, whether it is bidirectional or unidirectional. So the last topic in this identity is about common identity attacks. So there are like a couple of common identity attacks. One is password based attack. The password spray attack attempt to match a username against a list of weak passwords. Whereas brute force attack try many passwords across, sometimes they're using dictionary. They're trying a lot of different password in a hope that someone will open the account. And the phishing attack is sometimes we get an email which tells a story about, such as a security breach, and it gives an instruction to user to sign in and change their password. They try to steal our information like that. So that is a phishing attack. Spear phishing scam is a variant of phishing attack. Here they build a database about user which can be created highly credible mail. seems like it can show, it can put your name etc there, so it will seem like it is coming from a someone in the organization who is requesting the information. So this practice is called spear phishing because it is highly targeted. So the difference between these two is important. Sometimes there is a scenario given and asked, hey, what kind of attack it is. Type of risk, there are user risk and sign-in risk. So user risk represents the probability that a given identity is compromised. Sign-in risk represents the probability that a given authorization request is not authorized by the identity owner. So here the user identity itself is compromised. Here sign-in is that the user identity is not compromised, but the authentication request isn't authorized by the identity owner. So this difference we need to remember. I think with this we are done with all the subtopics in this, and that finishes define identity concepts, and that covers this first pillar. So we are done with the first pillar, and the second one which we'll cover is describe the capability of Microsoft Identity and Access Management solution. And let's expand. Once we expand it, we see there are like 4 subtopics, and which we'll cover all 4 one by one and see what is there which we should remember for the exam. We'll cover that in next video. Thank you.